Hey, this is Jeff, and today I'm back in Fallout New Vegas Ultimate Edition on the Xbox 360. I started this little mini-series a while back because I heard a number of people claim you can only escape the normally playable area of the world map with cheats on a PC. But as you will see as soon as it loads, that is simply not true. I'm starting from a save I made at the end of Episode 1 on the hill overlooking the road between the Hoover Dam and the Legate's camp. In Episode 2, I got all the way around Caesar's Fort to the southwestern shore of Lake Mead, past the barrier that prevents you from swimming out there. And in Episode 3, I tried to get to the eastern shore of Lake Mead. What I found was, in hindsight, pretty predictable. Just like the Colorado River that just ends in a deep canyon way south of Cottonwood Cove, the Virgin River just ends north of Lake Mead. It was actually a little bit different because the water disappears at a certain point. I don't mean the land slopes up out of the water. I mean the water just ends like a waterfall or something, except there's no waterfall. It's just a hollow nothing. Watch Episode 3 and you'll see what I mean. Anyway, I was stuck at the bottom and I couldn't get out, so today I'm going to try to walk around. With any luck, I'll be able to go far enough east to get around the other end of the Colorado River, cut north and get around the end of the Virgin River that I saw from the bottom last time, and get back onto the world map north of Nellis Air Force Base. By the way, in Episode 1, I think I made some kind of joke about how it would be funny if the Colorado River went all the way to Colorado, which would have been funnier if I was at the right end of the river. Below the dam, heading south, the river would actually go to the Gulf of California if it was geographically accurate. Above the dam, heading east, where I'm going now, that's what comes down out of the mountains from Colorado. In real life, I mean. In the game, hopefully it just ends like it does south of Cottonwood Cove. And I have no reason to believe it wouldn't, since the Virgin River does the same thing to the north. In fact, let's check the map. Yeah, we're definitely south of Lake Mead. Boone and Eddie can't follow me, obviously. There's the dam. The Colorado River where it flows into the lake, and north of the lake is what we saw last episode. If the New Vegas world space was physically connected to the Honest Hearts DLC world space, you could theoretically swim north all the way up the river into Utah and end up in Zion National Park, which actually makes me wonder. We know there's boat travel in the Fallout universe, like the ferry from Cottonwood Cove to Caesar's Fort, which actually, I just realized that doesn't make any sense. Cottonwood Cove is below the dam. Caesar's Fort is above the dam. There's no way for the ferry to get there. Maybe you're supposed to assume the ferry stops before it gets to the dam and lets you go ashore near the Legate's camp, and then you walk the rest of the way to the fort from there, but if you swim from Cottonwood Cove to the dam, you will see there's no way out of the canyon, except, a few little dead-end gullies like the one that leads to the Deathclaw Promontory. And I know the geography in Fallout games is painted in pretty broad strokes. Landmarks are in more or less the right place, but it's nowhere near street-by-street accurate. But it's one thing to orient the dam in the right direction, just a lot closer to Vegas than it really is, so they both fit on the map. It's another thing entirely to have a ferry go from below the dam to above the dam. And sure, Fallout's set in an alternate future, so maybe the Hoover Dam in this universe has a boat elevator or something, but the NCR controls the dam. It's not like they'd let Caesar's ferry use it on what is pretty clearly implied to be a regular basis. I think I just discovered a pretty glaring plot hole in Fallout New Vegas. I mean, maybe I'm not the first, but I've never heard anyone else mention it before. Anyway, what was I saying? Riverboats. Yeah, it seems like a ferry would be a more efficient way to haul cargo from the Mojave Wasteland to Zion, considering how rough the travel is supposed to be when you go with a Happy Trails caravan. I know it's just a scouting expedition to see what happened to the new Canaanites, but if it was me, I'd follow the river. Although, I don't know that much about the Virgin River. Maybe there's a lot of whitewater or whatever. Jed seems to know what he's doing, and he probably picked the overland route for a reason. And I see water over to the left, so... Come on. There we go. See if we can get a better look. Yeah. Yeah, this is where the Colorado empties into Lake Mead. And The draw distance on the Xbox isn't that great compared to PC, so we probably won't be able to see any landmarks, but that narrow point must be the back of Caesar's fort. Beyond that and to the left is where the net that keeps you from swimming out here would be. So we just need to keep going east until we reach the end of the river. And yeah, it looks like there's quite a bit of it out in the distance there to the east. In episode 1, it took me almost 20 minutes in real time to reach the south end of the river, but it's that long to give you a sense of scale, just how big the canyon looks if you swim to the barrier near Cottonwood Cove and look south. Theoretically, there's no need for this end to go as far, since you shouldn't be able to see anything in this direction from the normally playable area of the map. And if it does take 20 minutes, I'll probably fast forward the video if I run out of anything interesting to comment on. In the first episode, I decided to fast forward instead of jump cut for 2 reasons, really. First, so anybody playing along at home could see where I went and follow the same path to get there, and second, so you'd know I wasn't inserting fake footage from a modded PC game or something. I think by this point we've established this is legit, so, you can trust me on that one. But the first reason still applies if you want to explore out here yourself. So, if I'm in danger of hitting long stretches of dead air, it's either fast forward or listen to a cappella renditions of my greatest hits. I know, motion sickness or Jeff a cappella, that's a tough one. And there's Lake Mead, and it actually looks like the river ends right up there, so you may have just gotten a reprieve. And we're actually just starting to get into something we've seen in previous episodes, weird texture glitching, like that. I know I explained it in episode 1, but if you didn't see it, it was a while back, there are basically 2 things that you see in the game world. The first is raw landscape, like we're looking at now, the absolute floor of the game world. And then there are objects that are placed in the world by the game designers, everything from people, plants, and animals, and items you can pick up to furniture and buildings. And those objects also include things that you'd tend to call landscape features, like cliff faces, boulders, road surfaces, anything that has a decent amount of detail when you look at it. You generally only see this kind of raw landscape in large swaths like this in places like dry lake beds. Anyway, the raw landscape and large objects you can see from a distance, like cliffs and buildings, have 2 sets of textures. One low res to conserve computing resources when you're far away, and one high res for when you're up close. If you ever noticed a billboard or a building or something that was kind of blurry suddenly come into focus when you approached, that was the textures switching. They kind of had to do it that way because this game was made 10 years ago when PCs and consoles didn't have as much horsepower as they have now. Anyway, objects always have both sets of textures because the whole point is they're specifically placed where the player can see it or interact with them. And I'm going to drop a save here just in case. Out here you can sometimes fall in a hole that the only way out of is to fast travel, which would suck. Anyway, the landscape also has 2 sets of textures anywhere the player is supposed to be able to see it. Distant mountain ranges have at least the low-res version. But when you get way out here where there's no way to see the landscape from any normally playable area of the map, sometimes they don't have the textures set up correctly. And I know sometimes I rant about blatant bugs and game design choices I find annoying, but this isn't one of those times. There's no point taking the time to texture something if the player's never supposed to see it. And when a part of the landscape doesn't have a texture properly assigned, it glitches. If I had to guess, I suspect what's technically going on is that the game just renders the landscape with whatever happens to be in memory where it expects the texture data to be. And that may or may not be a texture that's actually appropriate for it, which is why it flickers or just looks weird. But don't quote me on that because I don't know for sure. Yeah, the water just ends here like it did on the Virgin River north of the lake, which it did not do at the other end of the Colorado south of Cottonwood Cove, but either way we should be close to getting around the end. We could try to swim across, but it looks pretty steep on the other side. The texture glitching doesn't help, but I don't want to get stuck in the bottom again. Yeah, the texture thing begs the question. If some of the landscape doesn't have proper textures because you can supposedly never see it, why is the landscape itself even there? Two reasons, I think. The landscape is laid out in a grid of huge squares called exterior cells. If you sculpt the landscape in an extremely distant exterior cell from the playable cells, like to create a mountain range that looks like it's 10 miles away in the distance, the level editor kind of autofills the exterior cells in between and around that with height data. But if all you can see from the playable area is the tops of those mountains, then the tops are all the game designer has to go in and paint with the correct textures: dirt, stone, snow caps, or whatever. All the intervening space is kind of on its own. And the other reason is, even when there's no height data for the landscape, the game engine has to render something to meet the sky at the horizon line. In fact, we saw an example of that in episode 1, where I found the edge of the world, an abrupt transition from a cell that had height data to one that didn't. And beyond that point, there was nothing but totally flat, featureless base, like way below, stretching all the way to the imaginary horizon. And I hope I haven't gotten myself stuck here. The canyon without water goes a little farther than I thought, but I somehow seem to have gotten canyon to the south of me as well. And the sides of the little point I'm on are definitely too steep to climb back up if I go down there. I think I might have to do a little bit of backtracking unless this connects. No, I do not think it does. It might. See what... Nope, it definitely does not. And the textures really aren't helping, but none of that looks even remotely climbable. Backtracking it is, then. I'm like some jackass jabbering away on his cell phone, completely lost in conversation, and then you look up and you're like, where the hell am I? All right. Yeah, it looks like the canyon split and doubled back on itself, and I was more concerned with finding my way north, so I didn't notice that I was getting cut off to the south. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it'll be too far out of the way. Yeah, this looks pretty manageable. Skirt around the south branch of the canyon, and we'll be back on track. You know, I think I'm going to drop another save here. I'm worried that when we loop around, we're going to be on the inside of those mountains, the side toward the canyon, I mean. And if there's no way to go over or through, we'll be no better off than we were at the bottom of the Virgin River. I mean, it doesn't look too steep right here, but by the time we get to where we're across from the dead end point where I had to start backtracking, who knows? Yeah, this is what I was worried about. If there's no way over this, we could follow the canyon all the way around its north branch back to Lake Mead. I mean, at least we'd still be on dry land above the western shore where I was trying to get last episode, but there's no guarantee we wouldn't still be stuck halfway up the hillside like this. We could end up circling all the way around Lake Mead in the Virgin River and wind up on the hillside across the lake from Caesar's Fort under Guardian Peak. On the other hand, never underestimate what you can do in a Bethesda game with enough tenacity and a quick thumb on the jump button. These switchbacks are always the place that you can, where the slope changes, you can sometimes get a foothold because there's a certain slope threshold above which the game says you are or are not allowed to jump. And if you catch one of these places at the corner, sometimes the game doesn't calculate the slope just in time to let you. Yeah, that looks like the spot right there. You will not defeat me. All right, we'll call it a draw. But you are not the only switchback in the world, my friend. I know that we can find a place. Oh, maybe? Oh, yes. Yes. Ha ha ha! Premature celebration, anyone? That doesn't look good. If I go down there, I'm not getting back up. I really want to be going north, I think. Yeah, I'm way off the map to the east, and ultimately I want to head north, but I also don't want to get stuck in a hole. I might have to swing even farther south to be safe, but you know what? Time for another save. I'm about as high as I can get in this local area, so if I do go down and get stuck somewhere, this isn't a bad place to start over from. And candidate number 1 is this ridge right here. It's narrow, but it's going in the right direction, and it doesn't look too steep to get back, and it might connect with that mountain across from us. Yeah. I don't think it does. No, it does not. That's a shame, but at least it didn't take us too far out of the way. All right. Just head back to the save spot. And see what's to the east. I was really not hoping for more of this convoluted business, but is what it is. And I'm kind of losing altitude, which is not good either, but if I can just keep from slipping down any further, I think I saw... Oh. Yeah, that was... Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought I saw, and we just managed to hit it before we went too far down. All right, this is looking good. If I'm right, this should bring us out on the outside of the mountains that surround the lake and the rivers. And that... Well, this is kind of embarrassing. I kind of oversimplified the way the landscape textures work. There's actually a low poly model or mesh. Low poly is low polygon. Everything you see in the game is made of a mesh of polygons, and that mesh or model is what the textures are painted onto so that you can see them. And you should probably just Google how do 3D graphics work if you want to know at this level of detail rather than my half-assed on-the-fly explanation. But the low poly landscape model is slightly underneath the actual landscape. It follows the contours of the high poly landscape you walk on. And great. Well, actually, if we're on the outside of the mountain range, this might not be so bad at all. And I'm having a hard time talking and watching the compass and watching where I'm going so I don't plummet to my death all at the same time. So I'm going to... set a map marker just so I have a general idea of which way I ultimately want to go. At Nellis Air Force Base. And I'm going to wait until morning so I don't stumble off a cliff in the dark. Anyway, the low poly landscape model is what actually has the low res landscape textures and what you see when you look at the landscape from extreme distances. If you're playing on a PC, you can see it by turning off clipping and walking at a slight downward angle until you get between the two layers. But that rock that we saw back there in the gully was a case where the low poly model was actually poking through the high poly model, and you could see it in the game world. And I know I just autosaved when I waited, but I'm going to drop another real save just in case. And I'm going to take care of a few biological necessities involving beer, incoming and outgoing. Back in a flash. And we're back. Now, what was I doing? Right. The plane looks promising because it's definitely on the outside of the mountain range relative to the water. But sticking to the high ground leaves me with more options if I can straddle both sides. So, as needs, as circumstances require, I can head in or out if I'm kind of on top in the middle. And that definitely doesn't connect to anything. Well, I guess we'll keep poking around. Is that the one I already went down? I think it might be. I'm not sure. No? No, the next one to the left is the one that I walked out before and didn't connect. But then when I looked over there, I could see that none of them connected either. So, right, I'm not bothering going all the way out there. So, there might not actually be anything that connects these two mountain ranges. Which would mean that this isn't really viable. Our only option is going to be going down to the plain and seeing where we can get from there. All right, back to plan B. Let's see if we can find a way safely down. And the game is pretty generous about, well, I mean, you've seen me exploit the jump button to climb and walk down some fairly steep things that there's no way to walk back up. But what I was saying is the game is fairly generous about letting you walk down really steep inclines as long as you don't, like that. Well, I was going too fast, so it kind of jumped. So you want to take it slow. There's more of the low poly landscape poking through the high res landscape, and some interesting stuff going on out there. But you do anyway. Yeah, you do not want to, and that was a little too fast too. Got away with it. Yeah, you can go down some really insanely steep hillsides like this as long as you take it slow and don't, you make sure that you're kind of hugging the wall, like you're moving in the direction of, oh, wow, that's cool. I think what we're seeing is the low poly landscape is discontinuous. The height data doesn't match, so there's a gap at the boundary of two exterior cells. So right here we're actually seeing up through what is theoretically the absolute bottom of the game world, which you can easily do on the PC by turning off clipping, like I said, but you will never see this on the Xbox 360. Okay, all right. Well, we're not actually under the low poly absolute bottom. The high poly landscape is discontinuous, and we were under that. But Yeah, this angle is actually an absolutely perfect demonstration of what I was talking about. The low poly landscape with the texture glitch following the contour of the brown high poly landscape right above it, and they're both discontinuous with the adjacent cells. Well, even if I never make it to Nellis, that was worth it. Anyway, let's see if we can regain the high ground from over here. And we're starting to get into more, varied. It's not just that flat hillside anymore. We've got some switchbacks, and I think we have a winner. Oh yeah, that wasn't well. We'll get up this. That's no problem. Or maybe we don't. Yep, there we go. All right. Not a particularly big winner, but we are definitely gaining altitude. See if we can get up any of this. Maybe right over here to the right. That looks, yep. And that definitely is looking like it has some potential. There we go. Have a good feeling about this. Oh, and yeah, I think that may be the edge of the world I was talking about. I mean, not the same edge from episode 1, but I think that hard line may be the point beyond which there's no more height data. Anyway. Yes. I think we're on the ridge that to the left of us is the basin that the lake and the rivers are in, and to the right of us, beyond here, there be dragons. Oh. Will I ever learn not to count my chickens before they hatch? Check the map. All right. I think we'll be okay if we commit to the inside path. We should be well above the level of the cliffs above the lake. Just, so we'll be able to... Oh, no! Oh, remember, kids, don't drink and climb mountains. Yeah, that's what I was saying about if it's too steep and you run, you'll just plummet to your death. Well, fortunately, this save wasn't too far back, but I'm going to take that as a sign to call this part a wrap, and I'll see you again soon.